Hi, everyone. Hoping you're having a great DaprCon so far. My name is Ori Zohar. I'm a Dapr Docs maintainer, and I'll be moderating today's Dapr maintainer panel. So we have some of Dapr's maintainers. We don't have all of them because there's quite a few. So I'll have them join me right now so we can meet them. Yeah, here they are. So welcome, everybody. Again, we only took a selected few. And this is really a chance for the community and all of you tuning in to meet some of the maintainers we got at Dapr. So let's go around and kind of hear from each one of you what you're maintaining, how you came into the project. Start with you, Yaron.
Yeah, hi. I'm Yaron. I'm a co-founder of the project. I maintain the core Dapr runtime, the Go SDK, the CLI, and the components contrib repositories.
Awesome, Xavier.
Hi, I'm Xavier. I'm maintaining JavaScript SDK and became a maintainer almost a year ago.
Great. Rob?
Yeah, I'm Rob Landers, and I maintain the PHP SDK. It started about a year ago.
Great. And Artur?
Hi, my name is Artur. I'm a maintainer of the Java SDK on the runtime components contrib. And I started a little bit after Yaron.
Great. As I said, I'm Ori. I'm a maintainer in the docs, also quick start samples, and I maintain the blog as well. I joined around version 0.5, so that was, yeah, a year and a half ago, I think. Great. So let's get into it. So, Dapr is an open source project, and we got a bunch of maintainers here, but we have some other roles in the community. Yaron, you're a steering committee member. You're one of the co-founders of Dapr. Can you run us through what kind of roles we have in the community, how people are coming together to work on Dapr?
Yeah, sure. So there are several roles in the community. I think, the first very basic role is just the role of contributor. You come in, you open up an issue, you engage in a discussion, you ask a question on Discord, bam, you're a contributor because you're contributing to the project. People think that, it's just code that makes you a contributor. It's not. By answering other people's questions, by engaging with the community, you contribute to the project, whatever it is. That's why it's called, a contributor, and that's why it's, capturing such a high level and like so many different things that you can do for the project. It's not just code. It's not just, becoming, a maintainer. It's literally everything that has to do with engaging the broader community. And then the next step beyond that, after you've contributed a lot to the project, done, maybe like reviews on your own time, engaged with maintainers, maybe done, a few PRs, and you get to start to have a really good grasp of the technical subject in Dapr in one of the repositories. Then the next step is that of an approver, meaning you have the technical proficiency to be able to review code and then approve it, and then basically signal to the maintainers of the repository that, yeah, this code is actually okay to go and to be merged. And that's a pretty good position to make yourself available for the next role, which is maintainer, where maintainer is basically the top role that you can have, because it means you are responsible for the technical direction of the repository that you're maintaining. You basically make the technical decisions, and you get to work with the community and making others go from being contributors to being approvers, and then onboarding them to become maintainers. That's a really important role. But then again, even just, the role of contributor where you just come in and talk to someone, that's immensely important too. And every maintainer basically started off with that.
Yeah, that's a great point actually about what a contributor is. And I saw a lot of the other panelists nodding, because the way we're looking at it and the way we're actually measuring even contribution in the Dapr project is looking at the GitHub statistics for everybody, not just pushing in code, but also opening issues, commenting on proposals and issues. We feel all of that makes Dapr a better project and we have a more engaged community. So absolutely. So you said we got approvers and maintainers, and well, we start as members, and then we kind of go through them. And we actually have a few of the panelists who became maintainers in that fashion. Rob, you came into to Dapr from a contribution, really. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So it was Thanksgiving weekend last year. And yeah, I was I have a system that basically maintains our money, and it runs PHP and C#. And I was looking at maybe rewriting everything in C# to run it in Orleans for the actor runtime. And that's when I discovered Dapr, and I discovered how it worked. And then I really started digging into it, and I was like, you know what, I can do this and make it run in PHP as well. And then thus the PHP SDK was born.
That's awesome. So a whole SDK contributed by somebody who had a need, and now it's actually available to everybody, which is the best kind of contribution that we get. And Xavier, you had a similar journey, right?
Yeah, actually, it's even a bit longer. I've been following Dapr for quite a while. I think it was Dapr 0.4 when I started with it. I started off with Python because I wanted to run some reinforcement learning on top of it. Contributed some issues back to the repository, to the community there. And then I started working on my own projects, and I saw like my two go-to language is actually JavaScript and TypeScript. And I saw there was not really a JavaScript, TypeScript library out there for Dapr that allowed me to interact over HTTP. So I worked on creating the HTTP library and contributed that as well.
That's great. Yeah, that's a more recent one, and definitely a lot of JavaScript users out there that are going to have a much better experience with the SDK. So that's terrific. I want to jump in now to something that I think would be very interesting to a lot of the people who are using Dapr today and seeing all this cadence of releases. And as Mark and Yaron said in the keynote, we've had a pretty good constant cadence. We launched version 1.0 in February of this year, and we're at version 1.4 right now and moving towards 1.5 soon. Artur, I'm wondering if you can give us a little bit more of an insight of under the hood. How does the release process happen? How do the maintainers come together and put together a release?
Oh, that's a very good question. So first of all, we have a cadence, right? So and we want to make sure that the SDKs also follow the cadence. So you're gonna see every other month a release of Dapr, and there's a code freeze date where we basically create the release branch out of master. And the release branch is very important because it's out of the major and minor version of Dapr, and that's going to allow us to guarantee hot fixes of previous releases as well. So we just don't release just master. We actually keep release branches for every release we ever done. And we will make sure we run E2E tests on AKS and on Kind. And we are working on a way to create to run E2E tests on other clouds as well. So that's going to say that overall Dapr features are working. For components, we have conformance tests that make sure that the components that are in GA and some other components as well that are opt-in for the conformance test are conforming to the Dapr API. So these are another set of tests that run in components contrib. And then we also have performance tests for some features that are important in Dapr that we think it's important enough to have a performance test at this point, especially service invocation, where we look at to see if there's any deviation of performance from the last release. We also have long haul tests, which is a test environment that we have locally that simulate a real production application with multiple components. And we deploy the release candidates and we observe metrics to see if there is any change in CPU utilization, memory utilization, or latency. So this with in addition to that, I was about to forget, we also have automation for quick starts and examples, not only in the runtime, but also in SDKs. It means that all the stats that you see in the README file, they say do this command and then look at his output. Look at this command, then look at his output. All the many of those, I would say the majority of those is now automated. And thanks for there's also another project in our repo that we have to Charlie actually created to be able to support this side of automation. So between all of that, we validate the release candidates, and then we cut multiple RCs as we see fine regressions. We keep cutting more and more RCs, and then once we reach a version that we believe it's stable enough, Then we cut the release by tagging using GitHub tag, and then the automation on GitHub workflow takes care of the release. And the SDKs work in a very similar fashion, but with their own little differences because each language has its own way of doing things. But that's a high level of what we do, and we have caught issues with these tests. So it is something that has been proven valuable to us. So we're not afraid of cutting more RCs. We want to cut as much release candidates as we can as we catch bugs as the test progresses. And we also have a set of manual tests that you can see in the release issue. If you look at any previous release, there's an issue that we track all validation steps, and some of those are still manual. So you can take a look at those as well.
Great, Artur. So it sounds like we have a lot of testing, some long haul tests, some integration tests. We're cutting RCs. That's great. Before I move forward, I want to remind people, if you have questions for the panel, we want to get to them. Please drop them in the chat on YouTube, and we'll try to get to them if we have time. So you said all that stuff is available on GitHub too. So if I'm looking to see what's going on and it's a release process, I can actually see the like a big checklist of what's going on. Yaron, can you tell us a little bit maybe about that specific kind of time between as we're approaching towards a release? I know there's a release team that comes together, and I think this is sometimes referred to as the end game. It has several stages. Can you walk us a little bit more about what's going on and how all these things that Artur just mentioned kind of come together?
Yeah, so at the beginning of a release, we triage issues, right? Maintainers basically go over the backlog and they decide what needs to go in or what doesn't. And we do this by also engaging with the community and trying to assess how much critical issues are there, how many bugs there are as opposed to just feature additions and enhancements and things like that. Then once features go in, basically it's free game for everyone. Like everyone can just go to the backlog, pick an issue and start working on it. And then as we go towards the end of the release, and like you mentioned correctly, releases between 5 to 6 weeks. Sometimes it's 7 weeks if we're not sure that we have all the necessary stability tests running. But as we approach the end of the release, we call it an end game. That's something that we actually took from VS Code. That's a process that they have. And then in the end game, we have this huge checklist where we form a release team, and the members of the release team changes. We are going to document how one can go about to join a release team pretty soon. But the core of the issue is you can go join the release team, and then you're granted these special permissions where you can actually release Dapr bits into the public. You basically work, if you're on the release team, you work with the maintainers across all the repositories. You look at the issue, you make sure that there's docs for everything, that that no feature went in without docs. Otherwise, if there's no docs, it doesn't really exist, right? You make sure that there's no performance regressions. You make sure that all of the tests are running. And then once that is done, we basically go and actually release the bits, and we schedule that entire process over the course of a day or two. And then once everything's done, we tweet on Twitter and mention on Discord and everything.
And the blog.
Yeah, sorry.
And the blog, yeah.
And the blog, yes, sorry. And the blog.
Yeah, and thank you so much for mentioning the need for docs. As a docs maintainer, that's something that's near and dear to my heart. Absolutely, if we have a new feature and it's not in the docs, it's like it doesn't exist, because how will people know about it? How will people know how to use it? So whenever you're contributing, that's an important piece to have. So we actually have our first question from the chat, and that kind of goes back to when we talked a little bit about the community structure. So Yaron, can you share a little bit about the open governance model? This is a question from Shankar for the project, and I'll add to that maybe a little bit of how we evolved, because we definitely kind of moved into an open governance model. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. And while I'm talking about that, if you can put the link to the Dapr community repository in the chat, that'll be great, because that has all the info. So if you really want to read it all about the open governance, just go to the Dapr/community repository and read there. But basically, when Dapr was first announced, Most of them, all of the maintainers, I think, were from Microsoft, and the project was governed under the MIT license, but mostly under Microsoft. We did announce when we first open sourced it that our intention was to give to a foundation, and in parallel to that, also go for open governance. So the importance of ensuring vendor neutrality was really there from the beginning, and that's even decoupled from the CNCF submission. For example, now we have a steering committee with no overrepresentation from one single vendor, even before Dapr in the CNCF. So today we have a committee of 5 members, 2 from Microsoft, 2 from Alibaba Cloud, and 1 from Intel. So there's no one has any overrepresentation, which means that the project is indeed vendor neutral. We have maintainer diversity from multiple companies. You see 2 from Microsoft here, 1 from Automatic, which is Rob, and 1 from Roadwork, which is Xavier. We also have additional maintainers from Apple, Alibaba Cloud, obviously. And so the steering committee is really the body that governs the project. So for example, right, something extreme, if you want to change the name of the project, the steering committee would get to make that decision, right? So no one company or no one entity can make that decision on behalf of the Dapr project. It needs to be voted on. There needs to be consensus. And of course, the steering committee works with maintainers and with the general community to drive major features and changes into the project.
Yeah, that's a great point. So this is kind of like how we're ensuring Dapr remains open. I kind of hope they don't change the name, by the way. I like Dapr, but
no one wants to change the name.
Good. You're a member of the steering committee, so at least we know your position on that. So I think we got another question, and I think this was kind of inspired maybe by Xavier and Rob's examples of becoming maintainers. Abhilash asked, if I want to develop a new SDK for a new language, which existing SDK should I refer? Is there any documentation available for new SDK developers?
So
want to take that?
Sorry, was that for me? Or
yeah, if you want to take that, go for it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm really passionate about SDKs, as you can see. Wow, SDKs. I would really want someone to take ownership of a Rust SDK. Honestly, I mean, there are many developers trying to use the Rust SDK. I think it could be a lot better. So for me, it's basically the Rust SDK. Regarding documentation for SDK developers, the best thing to do, the best documentation is to look at other SDKs. And I'm going to point you to the JavaScript and PHP SDKs as really good examples of SDKs that just implement the Dapr API in a beautiful way, done again by Xavier and Rob here. So yeah, just looking at other SDKs, there's an API spec to Dapr, so you can go ahead and look at that. Like you can go into the docs, go to the reference section, look at the APIs, and then see all of the APIs that the SDK should implement. You can do that. And then the most important thing to remember is, we want to ensure that the SDKs are natural for developers using the language of the choice. And we would like that over consistency, right? So, it doesn't have to be Pascal or camel case everywhere, but it's important that the code that the SDK exposes for developers is very natural for the language in which it's being implemented.
Yeah, and just to mention that we have several SDKs available today for .NET, for Java, for Python, of course, for PHP and Java and JavaScript, as we mentioned. And like Yaron said, we see that as an important part of Dapr, being friendly to developers in any language, because Dapr is really language agnostic. So additional SDKs would definitely help, but I would also ask people to help and just improve the current SDKs and the documentation around them, because that's really essential, we find, to people's experience with Dapr and how they build things with Dapr. So next up, maybe Artur, this one will go to you as well. So we talked about contributing different things, and we talked a little bit about releases. Dapr has a roadmap as well. So if I'm somebody who's not a maintainer, I want to understand what the roadmap is. I maybe want to influence it. Can you tell us a little bit how the roadmap is being put together and how maybe people in the community can check it out and maybe even influence it? Oh, you're muted.
So great question. So first, we have a roadmap project on GitHub, and you can look at that and see what is coming up next for Dapr. There are a few ways you can influence the roadmap. For existing items, you can obviously go to the roadmap, pick one item that is in your interest. You can comment on that, and you can explain the scenario that you're going through and why this is important. What scenario is going to unblock by us delivering that particular issue. So being scenario driven is very important, more than the feature itself. So that helps create a conversation among maintainers and give us a sense of priority. Okay, because if it's affecting you, it's probably affecting other people as well. So there's the one thing. The other thing is once in a while you're going to see issues popping up on Dapr list of issues that is scanned, asking for community feedback or even voting. So engage on those. So if you're asking for your vote, vote. And if you don't want to comment, you don't need to comment. But like click on that. Make sure you choose the option that can give us a sense of popularity on a given issue. And then also when you have a scenario that you want us to work on, when you're creating the issue, a new issue about a problem or a new feature, please be as descriptive as possible. And if it's a new feature, make sure you include the scenario you're enabling. Again, scenario is very important. If it's a bug, explain how to reproduce a bug and what is blocking you from doing. So we had some examples of that trigger hot fixes in 1.4 release, which is the latest release we had. And it was very clear the scenario that was being blocked, and then we have to work on the hot fix. So I think these are the best ways to influence. If you want to also contribute on the chat, you can also chat and have a discussion with a maintainer if the maintainer is live. But issues is the best way because you're not always online at the same time, right? So I think issues is the best way to try to influence the release.
Okay, so it sounds like the best way to understand what the roadmap is of course on GitHub. We actually have even a project that says what's kind of planned and what's going forward, and also engaging in proposals. So you can either open a proposal as an issue in the right repo, and please be as detailed as you can, and also engage on them. And we actually, all the maintainers, we look at those, and even just upvoting a proposal helps us understand, is this scenario a common one? Is this a problem that a lot of people are seeing? And we can kind of solve problems for the entire community. I know we have a couple more questions from the chat, but before that, I do want to ask a general questions about maybe the current roadmap. So I want to ask all of you in the panel, is there anything right now on the panel that you are excited about or that you want to see moving forward? Maybe Xavier, we can start with you.
Yeah, I'm actually looking forward. I think it was mentioned earlier as well in the keynote, the config API, because I currently see myself constantly dragging configs in different ways. So it would be awesome to see that streamlined and utilize Dapr for that as well.
So that's even like a brand new building block, really, in the Dapr terminology, a new API, which I believe Alibaba is also very much involved in shaping that. That's a great thing on the roadmap. Rob, do you have anything you're looking forward to?
Yeah, so I haven't followed it very closely in the last couple of weeks, but there's been some rumbling about a querying API and all that kind of stuff on State Store. I'm super excited about that, not having to do my own indices.
Yeah, that's something we actually heard quite a bit from people using Dapr, looking to expand the State Store retrieval of state into something a little more sophisticated with some form of querying. Artur, anything you're keeping an eye on?
Yes, I have my own list here. So the query state API definitely is I think is a good example also of how the community had the voice heard. It was like it's like everybody was asking for that. The configuration API as well, like Xavier said, and also there's a resiliency proposal up by Phil, and that actually is one of my favorites because it will enable a lot of retry logic to move out of the app code into Dapr. And it's a boilerplate code that people usually have to write over and over again. And it's going to include retry configuration, timeout configuration, and also circuit breaking built in. So it's very exciting actually. It's going to bring Dapr to a whole new level across building blocks. So I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, great. And Yaron, I know we heard a few of your favorites in the keynote, but maybe you want to add to that.
Yeah, I'll actually add something that relates to a question that was asked in the chat by Martin Brendel. So he asked, is there a roadmap for supporting pluggable components that come from external source, meaning that you don't have to compile the plugin into the Dapr runtime? And the answer is yes. This is on the roadmap. So we're looking at two main methods in how we can enable external plugins, components really. Golang doesn't really have a good way to deal with this today. So first, we're looking at gRPC components, where you can just write a gRPC process that can run next to the Dapr sidecar someplace else and can register itself as a component, as any type of component. There will be a perf hit there, obviously, but if it's running locally, it might be able to utilize Unix domain sockets, which Dapr now supports thanks to Intel contributions. So that's one way. And also, we're looking at WASM filters as an additional way. For writing like in C++ or Rust or, any language that, easily compiles into WASM, you'll be able to write these plugins that can get executed. So we basically want to take the Dapr component interfaces and create their proto gRPC and WASM equivalents. Those are two ways. There are other ways, but, it's on our GitHub issue. So if you want to join the discussion there, we'll be glad to have you join in, Martin.
Yeah, and just staying on the topic of components, I see we have another question from Loren. That when do you think we'll be able to develop components in other languages? I'm assuming other languages than Go, where they're developed right now, like C#, for example. Is there any plan of enabling that?
Yeah, it's that. So when we enable gRPC and WASM components, you'll be able to write, for example, for gRPC components, you'll be able to write components in any language that's supported by gRPC. Same goes for WASM. So yeah, that issue will basically solve for multi-language components too.
Yeah, so to me it sounds like the component model, which you actually mentioned that in the keynote, which is basically Dapr's biggest kind of extensibility. That will kind of bring it to the next level of extensibility, really.
Yes.
And I mean, we've seen so many contributions coming in from the community in the form of components that really make Dapr so useful in so many different scenarios, different environments, different kind of public clouds, and just enabling people to do more of that is absolutely going to be amazing for the Dapr ecosystem in general. So I actually want to move forward now to kind of giving some guidance for people who want to contribute. So hearing about all this good stuff. So we heard about the release, we heard about the roadmap, we kind of know how to engage with it. But if I'm a new contributor, what's the best way for a new person to start contributing into Dapr? And maybe actually on this part, I'll start as a docs maintainer. I think the docs is actually a great opportunity to get your feet wet with contributing to Dapr, especially if you're new to contributing to open source. I think a doc is really an easy way to do it. Our docs are actually built using Hugo. It's very easy to figure out. If you know Markdown, you basically can contribute to the docs. You can also build them locally to see kind of how it works. So as we said, any contribution that helps Dapr become a better project is welcomed. And in the docs, that includes things like even typos and misspelled words. That's a great first contribution. Just get your feet wet, see how the process is going. of course, broken links. Of course, if something you feel is not there and needs to be maybe elaborated on. And of course, as we said before, if you are contributing code, you definitely want to contribute the docs that would reflect the change in behavior or the new feature in there. So I would recommend going to the docs whenever you see something that you feel, hey, that needs to change. We have kind of like a branching strategy, and there's some guidance in the docs about how to contribute to the docs. So please check that out. But I think that's a great place to start. And we also try to have the good first issue, which is kind of like a standard in GitHub in general for new people to find issues that have been opened and they want to address. Any of you have any recommendations or kind of ideas on how to get started contributing to Dapr?
Yeah, I think the good first issue label is definitely something you should check out. We just recently added a couple of them to the JavaScript SDK, where even someone already picked them up. It's typically something like creating an example for invocation. How can you do an invocation with the SDK? So I think it's perfect to start with those. It couples some of the documentation that you have to read for that together with some of the code writing already, and then you really gradually roll into the project, contributing to everything. And then once you get your head around everything, all the concepts of Dapr, you can start contributing to all the SDKs and really the inner parts of that.
Yeah. Artur, do you have anything to add to that, maybe?
Yes. So there is code contribution via documentation or via code. Also, answering questions on Discord is a way of contributing as well. So join the Discord channel. And another contribution that people can do, and it's not that obvious, is that you don't actually need to be an approver or maintainer to review pull requests. So if you feel comfortable with the programming language and you want to like, oh, let me look at this PR, let's see what it does, you might be able to catch obvious mistakes on the language itself, not necessarily in the Dapr context, but the context of the language, that you can help the maintainer. Oh, I caught these issues for you in this PR. So that also helps. Although your approval does not necessarily count, you can definitely find issues in pull requests. And also testing components. So components contrib keeps growing. Not every component is in GA. Not every component is in the conformance test list. So if you can add a component to the conformance test list or test it out manually. So for example, if you are passionate about MySQL and you want to validate the MySQL test state store, you can do that and find issues and report issues back to the community. So you can. That's also another way to contribute as well.
Yeah, that's great. I think as we said, and we keep saying, like the components is a big opportunity to contribute and help Dapr grow. Maybe in that point we can take a question from earlier from Oliver about AWS and GCP contributions. Yaron, do you have anything to maybe shed some light on that?
Yeah, obviously, you know, the Dapr project welcomes everyone to work on Dapr. Microsoft, AWS, Google, any major Alibaba Cloud, yes, they've been with us from literally the beginning almost. And we have been seeing contributions coming in from Google recently. I personally haven't seen from AWS, you know, anything that was coming in. So yeah, I'm hopeful that they will join the Dapr project. They are most welcome.
So we haven't seen officially from AWS, but we definitely have people in the community who are running applications that use Dapr on AWS, and they themselves made contributions, even in the form of components, authentication to AWS services, and so on. So you also have the ability to extend that ecosystem in the direction of really any environment you're working on, just by being somebody who's knowledgeable and has some skill in the language or the domain, like the hosting environment. So we really love seeing those come in. Artur, I believe there's another question here about the criteria for components to become GA. Can you maybe talk about that?
Yes, that is actually a great question. We have been exploring that recently. So the criteria to be GA right now is that the components should be passing the conformance test. It needs to have at least 2 production use cases, and it has to be maintained by at least one person plus the maintainers of the project. So we are actually exploring changing that criteria. So it is there's a proposal for that, and that proposal is also being brought up to review to the steering committee. So it's a great question, and then we are actually exploring changing that. Maybe Yaron, do you want to take a step on that as well?
No, I think you did a pretty good job, describing it. We are working towards changing the criteria, the GA criteria specifically now, for just making it a little bit more easier, robust and also clear and very explicit for how to get a component going from beta to GA. Because we did hear from the community, where lots of users are like, yeah, like the Dapr APIs are 1.0, they're stable, they're backward compatible, but we want the components themselves to have this GA qualification where, we can make a bet that the component API doesn't change. So that's a really good motivation for us to bring as many components as possible to GA.
And one thing that we hear feedback from the existing criteria is that it requires 2 production uses of the component to be called to be part of GA, but also have people waiting for it to be GA for them to use in production. So it becomes a chicken and egg problem with the current criteria. So that's a feedback that we got. So we're looking to that now.
Yeah, great. Now I kind of want to move on. So we talked about maybe how to get started with contributing and the roadmap and all that. So let's say I decide to contribute. I wonder if you can give a little bit of insight as not just maintainers, as approvers, which is part of the maintainer work. What kind of things are you looking for in a PR? How can I make a more kind of efficient kind of contribution, save some time? I know, Rob, maybe you have some tips and tricks for somebody, what to look for, what to do, definitely in your repo or any repo, really.
Yeah, so I think the first thing is that it needs to solve some sort of problem or provide something new. And I think that's a key point, but not necessarily. Like, it could just be refactoring and cleaning stuff up, which in my mind solves a problem of cleaning up some code. So I think that's like the first thing. And then beyond that, like, the sky's the limit. Like, I don't really have anything super specific, but those are just my 2 criterias. So
yeah. Xavier, do you have any pointers for people who want to maybe contribute to the JavaScript SDK, or again anywhere?
Yeah, no, definitely. So I think one of the most important things I look at when reviewing a PR is, does it follow some of the code styling at least? I think it's important to have clean code everywhere, that it's documented well. If that's not there, I will just comment on it and make sure that people see it and that they add on it and that we work together on actually solving the PR. So feel free to contribute. If you feel unsure, feel free to shoot questions on Discord, anywhere else, on the GitHub issue even, and then we just walk through it together.
Yeah, and I think that you actually made a really good point that the maintainers and approvers of the Dapr project are really available. We sometimes take a little bit of time to get to everything, but because we just have an overwhelming, excited and energetic community. But we are available on Discord. We are definitely going to interact with you on your PR on GitHub. I would add to all that we really want to see PRs attached to issues. The issue is really where we have the discussion and the conversation on whether the PR is necessary, if there's any design issue there, that we want to make sure that we kind of work that out. And also letting the community kind of chime in, as we said before, on what the thing is that you're doing. If you're just fixing a bug, then of course that should be an easy one. You just reference the bug. I can tell you in the docs, yeah, if it's a typo or something like that, probably you don't need an issue. If you really want to restructure something or want to add something significant, we really want to have these discussions on issues. maybe just one more thing before I kind of let Artur and Yaron also kind of chime in. In the docs specifically, Xavier mentioned in his repo code styling guides. In the docs, we have kind of style and tone for the documentation. And this is just an effort for us to be consistent. Different documentation in different projects take different choices. We kind of outline them all in the contributing section of the docs, and you can see how to contribute to the docs. So some of the wording, some of the phrasing, that could save us a lot of time. And sometimes you will see us just suggest stuff. GitHub has this suggestion feature where we kind of like say, how about considering maybe rephrasing it this way? That makes it easier. But sometimes we know not everybody also is an English speaker. And if you want some help with phrasing stuff, then we're happy to kind of jump in also and work with you on that. So I would say in the docs, definitely read the styling and tone guidance. And also, again, going back to what I said before, just having an issue attached to it. Yaron, is there anything you want to add to that, or Artur?
I just want to add one thing that just crossed my mind. Because we are post 1.0 version, we also look out for breaking changes. So every change has to be backwards compatible, unless it is removing code that was marked as deprecated before. So we really watch out for that. I especially watch out for that on every PR. Look out for breaking changes.
Yeah, Yaron, anything to add?
No, Artur actually just mentioned what I was gonna say. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think as we see Dapr kind of being adopted more and more, and really people, we put version 1.0, which was the first production-ready kind of official release of Dapr in February. So of course it takes time for people to actually build production systems. But now we have quite a few people adopting Dapr, and we're going to hear from them actually in other sessions in this day, especially in the other panel. So looking forward to that. But breaking changes is a serious thing. We take that very seriously, and that is one of the things we're really looking for, definitely, of course, in the code. Yeah, okay, great. So I guess we only have a couple of minutes left. I'll give you the maintainers an opportunity to maybe do kind of a call to action. Is there anything, really briefly, one sentence that you want maybe people to engage with, help you with, contribute to Dapr? Let's go around the room. Yaron, let's start with you.
Yeah, well, I would like to see more contributions around Google Cloud Components in particular. So if you go to Components Contrib and you look at, or to the Dapr docs and look at the reference section, we're a little low on GCP components. It would be awesome to have the community add those. Yeah, so that's just great. And just in general, go to the Dapr runtime, look at the issues in the upcoming release, and just help maintainers out. I really love our community, and also make sure that you join the Discord channel. There's awesome. Talks there about really interesting stuff that don't necessarily have to do with Dapr. Just people talking about any kinds of development problems out there.
Okay, thank you. Very briefly, Xavier.
I will try to keep it short. So I think for me the most two important things as well to get some help on is documentation, and then the next one is examples, and more specifically end-to-end examples where it's really used in small projects.
Great, Rob.
I'll echo Xavier exactly the same. Like, we definitely need some more examples in PHP land and some more documentation. I think there's a big release that I've been working on the documentation for quite a while that I could use some help on. So
great. Artur?
Yes, so more specifically, we are looking for new approvers and maintainers on the Java SDK. So if you are a Java developer and want to get involved with the Java SDK, there's a big opportunity now. So look at the issues, look at PRs, and ping me. I'm happy to work with you on a plan to have new approvers and future maintainers.
Great, thank you. So thank you again for everybody for tuning in. Thank you for the maintainers on the panel for kind of answering all these questions. I really recommend everybody go check out the Dapr/community repo to learn more about how to engage and the contributing guidance in the Dapr docs and talk to us on GitHub, on Discord, and have a great rest of your DaprCon. Thank you very much.